Hello, I am Lincoln. A while back I added the Ganons to the Tournament of Hyrule tier list. However, I actually intended on doing all Zelda villains. However, it ended up being too many, so I split it in half. So now there's the Ganons part. Now we're going to be doing the rest of the villains that we missed out on in the Ganons one. So now let's see which Zelda villain is the strongest by adding them to the tier list. Actually, let's start off by going over some stuff that has gotten people pretty confused. In this tier list, everyone has all the items they've collected throughout their games. However, there's an exception, and that's the Triforce. Unless they were specifically born with the Triforce, they don't have the Triforce. Another thing is that I understand that all Ganondorfs are the same person, except for maybe Tears of the Kingdom. But the thing is that Nintendo can just change the way the timeline works at any given moment. So it's best to just count each game separately unless they're specifically designed as sequels that take place very shortly after each other. Also just gives me more stuff to work with, even if that does kind of ruin the power scalings on the tier list. Example, Ocarina of Time Ganondorf. Fairly strong magician, but had to obtain the Triforce. But for Twilight Princess Ganondorf, who's essentially the same person, the real Triforce was inside of him all along. Another thing to note is that people don't have armies here. I understand that some people interpreted it as the entirety of Hyrule is going to war, but that is not what I had in mind while making this. I actually was thinking that it's more of like a cage match. And so everyone is just on their own without an army. That is what makes CDI Ganon so special, and that's that the people that Link defeats turns into his army. And that's why it became difficult for me. And now XTR Wombat 4876 can finally rest in pieces. I mean rest in peace. I mean rest peacefully. I mean not die. I didn't kill. Let's get into the list now. This creature is meant to represent all of the evil in Termina. Probably one of the strongest villains ever. And you meet him, and it's just a, creature doing an interpretive dance. It's not really a threat. Of course, this is a joke. It is a really big threat. And besides, the stuff that just Majora's Mask has done to the people of Termina, like turning Cafe into a child and just straight up murdering some people, shows just how strong he is, really. Even if the boss doesn't reflect it that much. He's basically just a phantom. Then he becomes like a squid thing. Like, is this meant to be impressive? Like, he calls himself Bellum, but he looks like a Bellsprout from Pokemon. Definitely one of the weakest villains Link has fought. I feel like I really don't need to explain this one. I need to confess that I never made it to the third dungeon of Echoes of Wisdom. It's just that, coming from someone who has an incredibly high attention span when it comes to stuff like the Zelda timeline and Zelda lore and just Zelda games in general, there is way too much dialogue in this game. There is too much dialogue. I've never played a game before that has this level of off-the-charts dialogue reading towards actual gameplay ratio. The gameplay, it was fun, but I just couldn't play it because the game wouldn't let me play. I have to read all the dialogue if I want to understand what's happening. When all the dialogue is just a bunch of filler for characters that I do not care about in the slightest. But I have looked stuff up about this guy. Apparently, Null is the concept of evil itself pretty strong, and also the reason why the Earth was made. Again, it makes signs that it's pretty strong, but according to the boss fight that I watched, which is the form that I'll be ranking this off of, he appears to be, strong, but the general form of it led me to think that there were still many Links that could have achieved what Zelda could. Astor would entertain everyone else with some of his birthday party magic tricks for a little while, and then get crushed into a billion pieces by everyone. Varen is a powerful sorceress yet still very low level for a lot of the people we have on this list. She beats Astor at being a birthday party magician, but I'm not sure if that's worth anything. Need I even say anything? Get this leprechaun-looking buffoon into the evil jar. Onyx is a really badly designed villain. I mean, it's just a mean guy in big armor suit. At least this guy can turn into a dragon. But then again, when has that ever been a problem for Link? Yet another sorcerer, but this one's actually really cool. I like Body, specifically based on their design. Again, that doesn't get them anywhere. This sorcerer has used his powers not only turn Zelda into stone, but also turn a version of Hyrule into danger. Now, to be fair, it was a really low sense of danger. As a matter of fact, most people in Hyrule didn't even know that they were being saved when it was happening, nor that there was a problem that they needed to be saved from. But still, it's something. After Lovule's Triforce got destroyed, none of the incarnations born into that universe would actually reach any of the typical titles that their incarnations normally receive. Example, Ravio isn't courageous, he's afraid of everything. Hilda is foolish, rather than being wise. So in other words, Yuga isn't just weak, Yuga is several centuries worth of wars put together to make the weakest incarnation of Ganondorf possible. He can transform into just about anything, but always significantly weaker than the original fights were. I feel like in most other fights that would be really helpful, but in this fight, both uniqueness and strength are the two most important parts of a character's abilities. Most villains in Zelda are either people who are good with magic or people who can use a sword. But this is someone who's good with magic who is also a sword. Girahim is an amazing villain, and I just like how he makes himself a good counterpart towards Fi being the opposite of her. Being Demise's sword as opposed to Link's sword when they're supposed to be enemies. He gets fought several times throughout the game, and he shows off his insane abilities of not only being acrobatic and agile, but also very good with magic and sorcery and stuff like that. Zant, of course, he's probably the most popular villain for not being Ganon in the Zelda series. And his plan was pretty foolproof as a villain. Unfortunately, Ganondorf decided to steal it, and he decided to show off his Lanky Kong impression, showing that he too can inflate just like a balloon. But sadly, that balloon happened to pop. And when putting this balloon to a cage match, there are of course many higher ones that are like needles to it. But he makes it far enough, and that leaves us with the completed list of all Links and all villains competing in the Tournament of Hyrule. I'll be back for Zelda's later, but for now, this is where we're leaving the tier list at.